Are you managing Georgia probate from another state? What you can and can't do remotely. Let's talk about that. As a real estate agent who specializes in probate, I had a client from South Carolina, and he didn't really have to travel that much to Georgia to manage the estate. In fact, I only got to meet him on Zoom, and we will get into why that is later, or what made it possible for him to do that. Now, I will say, I do like to meet my clients face to face when all possible. But in this particular situation, he would come in, handle some of the stuff that needed to be handled physically, and he would jet back home. And we were able to do the closing as a mail away as well, and that's why I never met him face to face. Nonetheless, we were able to get the property sold and work together and get him through that process. So let's dive into some of the things that you will be able to do from your couch remotely versus things where you might have to get into the car or fly down on a plane to do in person. But before you and I dive in, we do offer a free ebook to people who want to avoid the mistakes that they could potentially make by going through the probate process. So there is a link below that you can grab so you can get that free ebook. Now let's dive in. So let's talk about what you can do from your home and remotely. First off, you can file the paperwork, the petition remotely. You may have to find a notary because it does have to be notarized, but that can absolutely be done remotely, and a good probate attorney can help you out with that process. Court hearings. If there's any court hearings that go on, it's going to depend on the county. If you're primarily in the Atlanta metro, my experience is most things can be handled on Zoom unless there's something that's contested. So if you are working on getting your letters of administration or your letters of testamentary and somebody's not getting along and they're contesting you either being the executor or the administrator, the county may choose at that point to make you show up in person so that they can kind of see what's happening in the family dynamics. But otherwise, in the greater metro area, I would say that they are still doing Zooms or Microsoft Team meetings to get their probate hearings and such done. Now, I can't speak for all counties in Georgia. Georgia has an overall rules on how probate is supposed to be handled, but it is truly up to the individual county and how they choose to implement those rules. So you may find some that are more remote, not rely upon technology such as Zoom and require you to show up face to face. But I guarantee you a good probate attorney is going to know which counties are going to make you show up in person versus which ones can handle the technology and do things via Zoom. So let's talk about the bond for a minute. There is a bond. Most wills are going to waive the bond and not require an executor to produce a bond. But if you're going after administration papers, whether you live in Georgia or not, again, depending on the county and whether or not the heirs are waiving certain powers and certain things so that you don't have to go in front of the court, could depend on whether or not you have to have a bond. Of course, a bond can be purchased remotely, but it does surprise some people. So I wanted to bring it up that be on the lookout for a bond if your will doesn't waive it or if you don't have a will and you're going after those letters of administration. Last but not least, the court can approve a resident agent because you're not physically in the state and the court may be trying to fine you. They can select somebody to be that before you on your behalf. Most of the time, this is going to be your probate attorney to where they can receive documents on your behalf, and then all you're having to do is sign them. Okay, now let's get into when you must travel. Obviously, once you discover that you may be an executor or you're going to volunteer to be an administrator, whichever the case, the very first thing you should do is secure the property. Go into the property, maybe get the locks changed. We've done several videos on how to go about securing the property, and you're going to be looking for a will. If there's one that exists, you're going to need an original one. You need to be looking for things like mortgage payments, utility bills, tax bills, insurance bills, all of those kind of things that, manage a household essentially. And because you're going to be or want to be aware of whether some of these things have been paid, whether or not you're going to have to pay them while you're waiting on your papers. Because depending again on the county, it can take weeks, if not months, to get your letters of testamentary and your letters of administration back. And if it takes that long, then you may be having to pay for some mortgage bills and so forth and so on. And nobody's really going to talk to you without those letters of administration, but you got to keep the things going simply because the house is probably the largest asset within the whole portfolio of the estate. So making sure that's secure and you've got all the bills that you need so that you can contact those companies remotely, and the mortgage statements, all that stuff is going to be needed to gather up, and that's going to require boots on the ground for you to physically get in the house and find these things. You may have to come down for a second time once you get those letters of administration, because technically you cannot do anything with the house, including the personal properties, until you have your letters of administration or letters of testamentary. Until you have those, then that's when you can potentially meet with the real estate agent, the clean out people if you need help getting the house cleaned out, and the estate sale people. You want to start getting a plan on how to do these things. And I think you should start personally. I like to start off as a real estate agent being one of the first people that you reach out to, because when we could gather a plan, and I have various vendors I can recommend to help with things like clean out and repairs and things like estate sales. So getting a plan together on how quickly we can get those things accomplished, and those things can be accomplished while you're not here, and how quickly then the house is ready to go and be put on the market. Again, as far as I am concerned and real estate is concerned, you can do electronic signatures with any real estate agent, and as long as I have keys and permission to go on the property, then I can, let various vendors in on your behalf. Now, here's where probate can get tough, and that's if people are not getting along. And I've seen it happen with people when they had a will, and I've seen it with people who don't have a will. I see it more when there's not a will involved, where siblings and heirs may fight on whether or not they're giving certain rights and powers to the administrator, or if they're contesting what is said in the will, whatever it is. If there's a fight going on, the likelihood of you having to show up in person, either for mediation or a hearing, increases dramatically. So if that's happening, you could probably expect to come down more than once to handle those things right along with your attorney, because I really think you need a probate attorney who is a litigator if you have people who are fighting, so that that person can litigate on your behalf. Now, when it comes into receiving offers and negotiating them, that all can be done remotely. If there are repairs required and you're not doing as is, because you can do as is, then that's where the real estate agent can let those vendors in on your behalf. And when it comes to closing, you can actually do what's called a mail away. Now, Georgia is an attorney state, meaning that we have closing attorneys here. And I always tell everybody, so they kind of understand what the attorney's role is in Georgia, it's just like a title company. They do very basic things that a title company would do in order to get a contract from under contract all the way to close, including all the costs, including getting banks lined up and payoffs done and all those things. They typically represent the mortgage company when there's a mortgage company involved, and then they represent the buyer when there's cash involved. But there's a big asterisk with that. They don't represent them as like advice and opinions. They are literally there doing minimal duties in order to get the thing closed. So they can do what's called a mail away. Now, I can't speak for all the closing attorneys out there, but I have found in the metro Atlanta area, you can absolutely do what is called a mail away. They will hook you up with somebody in your state that has Notary so that you can do the wet signatures. They're gonna need wet signatures. They're gonna need you to sign that way, and you're gonna have to do it in front of somebody, but it can be, in your town that you're able to get together with whoever that person is so that then they can get the paperwork back for the buyer to close. So usually if we're doing mailaways, we need to know well in advance so the paperwork can be appropriately, got out to the seller in time so it gets back for the buyer to sign. But it's absolutely possible to not attend a closing from a seller's standpoint in the state of Georgia. So I mentioned before, I like to get in early in the probate process. I don't even mind talking to people when they're working on getting their letters of administration or testamentary, because I can come follow along and see what's happening in the court, so we know we're getting closer to getting those letters. But I do like to meet with people once they do have those letters, so that even if we're not going to put the house on the market because it needs some work until a month or two out, we go ahead and sign paperwork so that I can let people in and out. And then when the time comes to launch it, then we can launch it and get it to go. And I'm kind of like a boots on the ground for somebody who's not physically here. I am happy to meet with people on Zoom, and I really like to do it in person if all possible. So if you find yourself, particularly in the greater Atlanta area, needing somebody like me, reach out. I will say, seek out somebody who really understands probate. It's a really niche market for real estate agents to be probate specialists. And I have all those vendor contacts we were talking about. If you're in another part of Georgia and you're like, oh, Tonya probably can't go to Savannah, or Tonya probably can't go to Waycross, reach out to me anyways. I will make sure you get connected to a good agent in your area who understands probate. So if you liked this video, that's what this whole channel is about: Georgia probate and estate planning. So hang around to watch more videos. And again, if you don't want to make mistakes, download our ebook that talks all about how to avoid the mistakes while you're going through probate. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.